Hey mama, if you're listening to this, you might be carrying a secret that feels too heavy to speak out loud. You look like you got it all together, you serve at church, maybe you even lead a Bible study. You smile when you drop off the kids, but no one sees the other side of you, the one that comes out behind closed doors. At home, you are a completely different person. You yell, you explode, you scream at your kids, sometimes in their face. You tell them to shut up. You grab them too harshly. You throw things across the room. You smack them in anger, twist their ears, spank them in rage, and immediately after, you are hit with a tidal wave of shame. You cry alone in your room and you whisper, "God, what is wrong with me?" You feel scared and disgusted by your own reactions. You're terrified that someone might find out. You wonder if your kids would be better off without you. You feel unworthy, broken, and too far gone to be redeemed. You try to fix this on your own. You listen to podcasts, parenting books, download freebies, but nothing changes. You keep falling back into the same patterns, and it feels like you are stuck in a cycle that you can't break. You don't trust yourself anymore, and if you're honest, you are afraid of who you've become. But here's the truth, Mama. You are not beyond hope. You're not alone, and with God's help and the right support, you can change. I'm Elizabeth, a mom of 4 and an anger management coach for Christian moms. And inside my Calm Christian Mom coaching program, I guide women just like you through a powerful transformation. This isn't shallow behavior management. We go deep. We address your triggers, your stress, your mindset, your nervous system, and the spiritual root behind your patterns. We invite God into every layer and walk hand in hand towards healing. In just 12 weeks, you can become a completely different mom, unrecognizable. One who leads with patience, not panic. One whose children feel emotionally safe around her. One who cultivates peace. This summer, I'm offering a Calm Mama strategy session, a powerful 15-minute one-on-one coaching session designed to help you uncover the root of your anger and receive spiritual, emotional, and practical support. It's your chance to experience what coaching is like with me before diving deeper into ongoing support. If we both feel like the full program is the next right step, we can talk about what that looks like for you. You don't have to keep living like this. Your family is worth healing, and so are you. Use the link in the show notes to book the Calm Mama strategy session.
Hey Mama, are you stressed about paying the bills, making dinner, getting the kids ready for school, finding time to work, prioritizing your fitness, and having alone time with your spouse? But it can be extremely difficult. You're doing everything and not getting a real break. This supermom mentality is causing overstimulation and extreme anxiety in many moms. It has to stop. You may be feeling burned out, exhausted, miserable, sleep deprived, deep in a rage, mom guilt, and more. In my Be Less Stressed coaching program, you will become an entirely different woman. Imagine being able to go out with your girlfriends without any mom guilt. Having evenings where you and your husband get to relax together and watch movies. Have a system in place to help eliminate stressful mornings and evenings with your children. Being able to work out in the afternoons so you can have more energy to run around with your kids. Imagine if you felt alive because you had more confidence and joy in your life. You were able to work for a few hours during the day and have a plan to pay off your debt. Imagine if you didn't go to bed without feeling all those anxious thoughts playing over and over again in your head. Everyone experiences stress and overwhelm, but it doesn't have to consume you and bleed into your family. Your children want a happy mom. Your family deserves a mom who is fulfilled. Your partner will benefit by you being relaxed and confident. Think about the toll of stress that is causing on your life and your body. How much longer can you stay in this cycle of stress? Don't you want a plan to start feeling alive and energetic again? My program, Be Less Stressed, will provide you with personalized action plan to a happier life. The person you will become during this program is magical and life-changing. Send me a message if you really are ready to ditch the stress and live the life you imagined for yourself. Hi, Mama. Welcome back to another episode of Emotionally Healthy Legacy. Today, I have a guest for us, and I'm really, really excited because I have followed Rachel for 2 years. I've been listening to her podcast, and I've been learning so much stuff from her, and I'm so excited to have her here. We'll be talking about our kids and their big emotions, and this is exactly what she specializes in. So welcome, Rachel. I am so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure for me.
Rachel, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about yourself and just how you got on this journey.
Yeah, and it's funny. I did not expect, I think a lot of people probably say this, but I did not expect to work with parents with kids with big emotions at all. I was actually studying to be a neuropsychologist. I thought I would be this scientist, and not even necessarily working with people, but I ended up getting pregnant along the way. So I didn't become a neuropsychologist. At that point, earlier in my career, I was a therapist. I was working with a lot of teens, kids, some adults. And as I was working, especially with teens, I was like, wait a second. Parents need a lot of support, not because they're not doing a good job, but because they want to do better. They want to know exactly what to say, what to do when their kids are anxious or when their kids can't get out of the house in the morning. And at that time, this was like 13 years ago, there weren't that many people helping parents at that time. So I switched at that point over to working with parents. And through my journey working with parents, I really drew in and also was attracted to parents with kids with big emotions because I myself am what's called a highly sensitive person. I feel everything. I have big emotions, and I'm also raising 2 daughters, both of whom have big emotions. So it makes so much sense that this is what I eventually would specialize in, which is where I am now.
That's awesome. It's interesting how life leads us where you think you're going to be and then where you are. Because I finished college as a physical therapist assistant, and then I'm on a completely different path now. I ended up leaving that career completely because it served me for a season, but it's not something that I'm passionate about anymore. So I am highly sensitive too. So, and I have one highly sensitive son who's really highly sensitive and big emotions. So this is amazing. And I'm so excited to talk to you about. So let's dive into what is a big emotions child. What does that even mean?
That's a great question. I'm so glad we're starting there because people make assumptions about what I mean when I say that a big emotions child is someone who just melts down all the time. And that's maybe part of it, but that's like the tip of the iceberg. Basically what I mean is a big child with big emotions simply feels things strongly. And there are many ways you see this in behaviors and reactions. So it's certainly if you have a child who melts down a lot, but it's also if you have a child maybe who goes from 0 to 60, like they're fine, and then all of a sudden they're not. Or a child who gets really upset if things aren't fair, a child who maybe has trouble thinking a little flexibly, like they want things to go their way. Maybe you'd call them strong-willed. But also kids with big emotions may be a little quieter about it. So big feeling kids, also maybe the kids who are sensitive to criticism, or they get really upset if an animal gets hurt. They're really big noticers. So it's really just simply kids who feel things strongly. And again, it comes out in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm. And so why do kids even have big emotions? I know that is one of the biggest eye-opening things that I've learned when I started listening to your podcast, how the emotions work. And I really like how you explain it. And I like the yuck factor and the big wave that comes and goes. So let's talk about that. Why do the kids adults sometimes have huge emotions, but it seems like kids experience them bigger.
Yeah. So everyone has emotions, first of all. And I used to teach undergrad psychology classes, and I taught the psychology of emotions, and emotions have to happen. Everybody has them. There are reasons for emotions, but some people, again, feel them more strongly. And so what happens is when you're a highly sensitive person like you and I are, we're not actually being more dramatic. We're responding, and kids are responding in proportion to how strongly we feel something. So we genuinely feel it stronger. So there's certain people, if you think about it like a continuum, some people just sort of feel things and it's like no big deal. And some feel them really, really strongly. That on the extreme end is a highly sensitive person. Big emotion kids may not be highly sensitive, although they certainly can be. I just kind of go on the side of the continuum where kids do feel things pretty strongly. And so the kids who do feel things strongly, it's really a temperament that is a big emotion child or a highly sensitive person. You're sort of born with that. And I find that it is a strength as well as a struggle sometimes, because it makes me very honestly good at my job. I'm very good at what I do because I get people so crazy well that I can help almost anybody. So there's a strength to it. There's the strength of having big emotions. But what I will also say, and I think this is what you were referring to, is that when you see these big emotions in kids in particular, the part of the brain that allows us to regulate our emotions doesn't fully develop until we're in our mid-20s. So if you already you feel things strongly, and you don't have a great way of regulating yourself, that's when you see these big behaviors and big reactions. And I always said that big emotions are simply a sign that someone's yuck. So that's the term that you mentioned that I use. Yuck is basically a term I use to describe discomfort. So if someone's yuck or discomfort is higher than their coping skills. That's really what it is. They have a lot of yuck and not great coping skills.
Yeah. And I like how you say that, yuck, because I know that when I talk to moms and they end up like, losing it with their kids and then they feel so guilty for it. I'm like, one of the things I say, I'm like, you didn't lose it because you wanted to. You lost it because you were really struggling, like in the heat of the moment.
Yep.
And like, you couldn't even handle it. It became too much. It's not because you're a bad mom. It's because you were really struggling.
And that's where the science comes in. Like I explained the science of that. So when a mom is struggling, she's literally dysregulated. Her fight or flight response has kicked in, probably because she's exhausted. Like you say, maybe her needs haven't been met. She has an agenda that she needs to follow. Maybe you have to get your kids out of the house. You're running late. And so the brain senses all that as a threat. And whenever we sense a threat, our fight or flight response kicks in. And what all moms need to know is that once your fight or flight response kicks in, it shuts down the part of the brain that allows you to be consistent with your values. So just to reiterate what you're saying, yes, scientifically, you're not a bad mom. You just have more yuck than coping skills in that moment. So it applies to parents as well. Doesn't make us bad moms at all.
Yes, I totally agree. And thank you for saying that as well. Can we talk about like what happens in the brain when someone is experiencing a big emotion? Because sometimes it feels like it's never going to end, right?
Yes.
When our child is experiencing a really big feeling of, especially like anger. Let's talk about anger, because I feel like sadness I can deal with, disappointment I can deal with, but it's the anger, especially with my boys, is when they want to get physical. Like
absolutely
want to get physical and aggressive. And to me, it's something ongoing that I'm still working through, is decreasing the threat in my brain, because I naturally see it as a threat.
Of course you do.
And they're physically being aggressive. And so, and it feels like they're not going to snap out of it. It feels like it's going to last, so let's talk about like how emotions come and go.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so important. So ultimately what we want to do is reduce the threat, just like you just said. That's what I teach, is how do we reduce the threat? Now, in your defense, reducing the threat with aggression or anger is very hard. We are wired to respond to aggression by going into fight or flight. So this one is a little harder to overcome. But one of the ways that I help parents overcome this is by exactly telling them about the question you asked. These feelings do end. So basically what I describe is something called the yuck curve. And the yuck curve is a rainbow-shaped curve, and it represents what happens when someone is in yuck. So a child is angry. And I will tell you something that I love to think about with anger. By the time a child is angry, they are extremely dysregulated. There's a quote that I love that says, rage is the flip side of helplessness. So when someone feels helpless, they really do get to this place of aggression, but it is not going to last. What's going to happen is they're going to do what I call traveling the yuck curve. So again, imagine this rainbow-shaped curve where it gets bigger and bigger. That's their rage is getting bigger and bigger. Eventually it reaches a peak, and it comes down. That's the rainbow shape. Now, what you see when they're on the curve is their behavior that's a symptom that they're in fight or flight. That's their aggression, their rudeness, their disrespect, their blame. These are all symptoms that they're on that curve. Their fight or flight response has kicked in. And when they travel the curve, when they get to the other side, what's going to happen is their brain will have at that point realized they're safe, and their fight or flight response will shut off, and they will be able to return to their more mature, responsible behavior as soon as they travel that curve. But if we try to intervene when they're on the curve, it's not going to go very well.
Yeah, and it's because their brain is shut off, that part of the brain that helps them understand and problem solve and make good choices. They literally can't access it. And it's so funny how we just want to teach them in that moment, right?
Right.
Like I know that's like a natural tendency because like that's the way my parents were. That's the way so many of us are. Like when they're, having kind of a meltdown, you're trying to explain to them or reason with them, but they literally can't process any of that.
Right. And we do it because we're in yuck.
Yeah.
And our yuck response, because we're on our yuck curve, our yuck response is to try to get control of the situation. But again, if we stop seeing it as a threat, and this is harder for aggression, I will give you that. But if we stop seeing it as a threat, and one of the things I talk about in my program is exactly what you just said. We see it as a threat partly because of our past, partly because our level of overall yuck, if we're exhausted, our needs aren't met, we're overwhelmed, we are in a constant state of yuck. And what we do is when we see kids' behavior, we respond from our yuck. And then that's when we're trying to teach them, because we want to control the situation when we're in yuck. It's a very normal yuck response to try to control our kids, control the situation. Yep.
Because it helps us feel better.
Feel better. Right. It doesn't work.
Yes.
But we think in that moment that it's going to help us feel better. And it doesn't. Just like kids think when they hit, they think it's going to help them feel better. It doesn't, but they think that in that moment.
Yeah. So, okay, now we understand kind of like what's going on, how our brain works, why kids, behave the way they behave, why we behave the way we behave. So here's $1 million question. What do we freaking do? Like, we can't just be like, oh, well, this is the way it is. So like, sure, throw things around, hit people. We can't do that, obviously. We need to set boundaries and limits. As parents, that's our job, right? To guide our children, direct them. So how can we help them, right? I love the way you teach. You talk about proactive things that you can do, because that's the best way to help them. And then in the heat of the moment, what can we do that's helpful? What should we not do? So
absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that, because I want to reiterate what you said. It's our job to set boundaries. And actually with big emotion kids, we have to have boundaries. They actually feel more out of control if we don't have boundaries. And so many parents are afraid of their kids' reactions that they don't set boundaries. And that makes the cycle continue on and on and on. So what do we do about this? First of all, we have to be consistent with our boundaries, but just as importantly, we have to give kids the tools to be successful. Often we set a boundary and they can't do what we ask. So we'll say something like, you can't hit your sister. They actually don't know how to do something different though. So what we have to do proactively is teach them how to reduce their yuck and how to increase their coping skills. So that's basically everything that I teach. How do we reduce kids' yuck and increase their coping skills? Again, that's all proactive. I'll tell you what to do in a moment. But proactively, we actually can reduce the likelihood that this is going to happen to begin with. Again, aggression, rage, but even other emotions are simply a sign their yuck is bigger than their coping skills. So we reduce yuck, we increase coping skills. Now, in the moment, for better or worse, and so for some of us, this is liberating. For some of us, this is totally scary. There's not that much we can do. With everything other than aggression, we basically have to let our child travel the yuck curve, and they're going to travel it faster when we are regulated. There's this term called co-regulation. Most parents have probably heard it. We need to regulate ourselves in order to help them regulate. That's why what you do is so incredibly important, because you're helping parents regulate themselves. That's the only thing you can do. Now, I will tell you with aggression, because you asked about it, one of the other things we have to do is stop aggression in the moment. So the phrase I generally use to stop aggression is, I won't let you. I won't let you hit. I won't let you throw something. And you literally take their hands. Now, ideally, you're doing this from, again, a regulated state, not an angry state. You're doing this because when a child gets to the point where they're hitting or they're throwing, they're so dysregulated that co-regulation is even more important. They need that boundary. They need to know there's an adult in charge who's going to set those limits to keep them safe. And we use our regulation to help them regulate. So that's what we do proactively and in the moment. I know that I just basically summarized a lot in 2 minutes, but hopefully that gives you an overview.
Yes, you did summarize a lot, because I am in one of your program memberships, and there's so much more to this, especially like, how do we actually reduce their yuck? Mm-hmm. How do we increase their coping skills? There's just way more that we could talk about for hours, right? Yes. There's so much information there. So that was helpful, especially like, I know that like I said, with my boys, they tend to go on the aggressive side, mm-hmm. and I have to get in the middle of them and like hold them and get in between them. It's like, I can't let you, or I won't let you, hit your brother. Like, I've got you, and sometimes I even have to say, like, I'll let you go when you're ready to be safe, because they just want to physically like hurt. And it's because they're so dysregulated. Exactly. I was raised where my parents, not my mom, I don't really remember, but my dad, he would threaten us with spanking when we would get aggressive. And that's because that was the only way he knew how to deal with it.
Correct.
So, and like that actually creates even more threat, right?
Yes.
And so, but somehow it worked when we were kids.
It worked, but at what cost? That's what I always say. Everyone always says, well, my parents did this and it worked. What happened was it just perpetuated a generation of parents who now still see their kids as a threat and who still need to control them. So when kids say or parents say I was raised that way, it is usually at a cost. So what I would say is we have to get them to stop hitting. No one's going to disagree. But if we do that through teaching them how to do better, then they stop seeing their emotions as a threat. And then when they're parents, they're not going to see their kids' emotions as a threat. So what happened to you, as you've described through this interview, is that you now see your kids' behavior as a threat. So you get triggered because you learned as a child that it was a threat. We want to break that cycle. And you're teaching about legacies. We need to break that cycle so we can have a healthier legacy for our children. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the next question. How do we not get triggered by their emotions, right? Because their big emotions, especially anger, will create a threat. Mm-hmm. In us, especially if it's like aggression, and that's like a natural thing, right? Because we're wired to like protect, especially if they hit one of the other siblings and like this mama bear comes out, right? Like
yes, you just want to
protect.
Of course.
So how do we not see that big emotion as a threat? How do we lower that threat in our mind, right? In our mindset? It's all how we think, right? Because how we think will affect how we feel and the actions we take.
Absolutely. So how do we not see that as a threat? And that is the key, to not see it as a threat. So you mentioned something important. We are wired to see aggression as a threat, but we're not, as human beings, we're not animals. We don't have to give in to every instinct. So are we going to initially see that as a threat? Potentially. So actually, let me back up and tell you what to do proactively, because you can see it as less of a threat proactively, and then I'll tell you what to do in the moment. Proactively, when you realize what's going on, I mean, I've helped thousands of parents at this point. When you do some proactive work about what you tell yourself about their aggression, if you know how to handle it, you will see it as a threat less. I create what I call when-then statements. So if you know, when my child does this, then I will, and you know exactly what you're going to do, your brain will not see it as a threat. So there's a lot of, what I teach in my program is a lot of proactive work to not even get triggered to begin with. But if you do, here's what I want you to hear, is that you're going to get triggered, but you can also recognize that you're triggered. And instead of, humans have the capacity to say, oh, look, there's my sign. My heart's beating faster. My face got hot. I have a symptom that I'm triggered. I don't have to just act like an animal and do what my emotion tells me to do. And this is actually what we teach our kids. We can have an emotion without being controlled by the emotion. So this is now what I teach parents and what I teach them to teach their children. So you can say, my face got hot. Now I know what I need to do is whatever the strategy is that they've learned. And they can stop seeing it as a threat in that moment by using their strategies, so then they can help the child. Because it's ironic. We want our kids not to be controlled by their emotions, but we're not. Most of us aren't doing a good job modeling that. So we need to do it first. And it is possible in the moment. Do a lot of proactive work. It's much easier. But you can actually stop yourself in the moment from acting like an animal who's sort of responding to their instincts.
Yeah. And you know why I think like all of this that you teach is so important is because we all know adults in our life who cannot control their emotions, who are controlled by their emotions. How many times have you seen people cause so much damage in relationships?
Absolutely.
And even to the point of murder. It's because people are not able to control their emotions, their feelings, and that anger and rage takes over and they do so much damage. And that's why like all of this stuff that you teach is so valuable, because we're teaching them like life skills, like legit life skills. And they're going to be better husbands and fathers and, wives and mothers, because they'll be able to communicate what they feel and maybe why they feel it, what they need, right? Like in the heat of the moment, they will recognize when they need to walk away and take a break instead of like throwing things and, damaging everything. Like this is like a freaking life. Like this is their whole life. This is so valuable and important. Like I want you moms to like think of this like ahead, like the value of like learning all this and like breaking these cycles of how you've been doing things for years.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm sure you get asked this too, but I get told this or asked, why don't they teach us in school? Because this is really the stuff. If I believe anyone who can handle their yuck or their discomfort in a healthy way is going to have a much more successful life. Anyone who can't handle their yuck, you're right, it's going to affect their relationships. It's going to affect their performance. It's going to affect their ability to, hold down a job potentially. A lot of people always say to me, why don't they teach this in school? And I think what you and I are teaching, I'm biased, of course, but it does really have an impact on everything. It really does.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Like emotions coming into every aspect of our lives.
We don't want them to, so we push them down, but they don't actually go away. They just pop right back up in really negative ways.
Yes. And that's like I know that's another episode I've listened of yours. It's like, it either comes out on others or we, suppress it and then it comes out in other negative ways. Like there's just a billion things to say about this. And mamas, I would really, really encourage you to go to Rachel's podcast. It's called the Parenting Long Game.
Your Parenting Long Game.
Your Parenting Long Game. And it's like one of my favorite podcasts because I've been listening to it for 2 years. And it's like a lot of stuff is like, okay, this is what's going on. This is the situation. This is what you can do proactively. This is what you do in the heat of the moment. This is what's helpful. This is what's not helpful. I've like learned a ton of stuff from you. Like it's better than any of the books I read. So like I seriously, like I love your content. I think it's amazing. And what you do is so extremely valuable. So tell us about where our listeners can find you besides your podcast and like what are your other offers that you help parents with?
Well, first of all, that's very sweet. I appreciate you saying that, especially coming from you. I appreciate that. So my podcast is Your Parenting Long Game. I also have a Facebook group that goes along with it. So Your Parenting Long Game Facebook group. I'm on Instagram, and I'll give you all the links as well. Instagram, YouTube. And then I have a program that is specifically for raising children with big emotions. And I'm starting also workshops in how you apply that to different situations. So lots of support if you are raising a child with big emotions, whether you really want to transform your home or just want to address one or two behaviors. But what I find is that a lot of the traditional advice out there does not apply to kids with big emotions. So I'm trying to kind of translate it to how would this work if you have a big feeling child.
Yes. And like I am in one of your support groups and I think it's absolutely amazing. You do a really good job answering stuff. So that's it for today, mamas. If you have like more questions, I would encourage you to, follow Rachel. And I know her Facebook free group has a lot of great tips on there. And then you can search in there with any other questions that are previously there and you'll find a lot of great answers. So thank you so much for being here, Rachel. I really appreciate your time. And
thank you for having me and thank you for what you do as well. I appreciate that too.
Thank you. Hey Mama, if you found this episode helpful, would you please share it with one friend that comes to mind that you know is experiencing these struggles and could benefit from it? I would appreciate it so much.
Hey Mama, do you find yourself snapping over the smallest things, like spilled milk or constant whining, then feeling horrible afterwards? If you're tired of losing your temper and you want to show up with more patience, I have something for you. It's a free training called How to Be More Patient with Your Kids so you're not screaming over spilled milk. Inside, I'll walk you through 10 simple things you can start doing today to become a calmer, more Christ-like mom, even on the hard days. To get it for free, just leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and send a screenshot to hello@emotionallyhealthylegacy.com. Or if you'd rather skip the wait, you can grab it right now for just $27. The link is in the show notes. Let's help you become the peaceful, patient mom your kids need.